Good morning, Sam. Sam?
Hello, how are you guys?
Good. How are you, sir? How was your new year? How was the start to the first 7 days? You break any resolutions yet?
No resolutions broken yet.
Ah.
It was good. I was got to a couple of basketball games, Huskers, so that was good, and watching the college football playoff, which I've enjoyed. I'm not sure you're allowed to enjoy it. If you spend too much time on
That's
social
true.
media or ESPN, you're supposed to hate it, and it's supposed to be very vexing. And but I've enjoyed it, and I will enjoy the semifinals. I think those are going to be fun games. I will say this much, that like a lot of fans are clearly enjoying the bowl season because we know
Yes.
what the ratings numbers are. The difference between just the regular Joe fan who isn't on social media and the journalist who is at this point getting larger and larger. And so, like as a journalist, it's probably wise for me to kind of stay off there, because the level of enjoyment you feel when you're not having to watch everybody complain about the product on the field, it goes way up.
Let's do this. Let's put so it looks like Elijah Pritchett, who is visiting, is trending towards committing to Nebraska from Alabama.
Yeah.
And Matt and I were just talking about him. Where does he fall in this category? Nebraska will be okay if he doesn't pan out in his 2 years, or crap, he's a bust. Nebraska's in trouble.
I think I think he would be pretty important, to the process. Of course, you can always go in the portal the following year, but I don't think he's going to be a bust. I think if he comes to Nebraska, he will be, decent at worst, and potentially very good at best, and an NFL player at best. And so, I think Nebraska's got a reasonably good bet there if they're able to get him. I think that would be a good pickup. There's other transfers who, Nebraska doesn't know how they're going to pan out because they haven't played a lot of football. But Pritchett has. Pritchett's played, more than most of the transfers that Nebraska's getting. And so, if you're able to compete at that level and play for Alabama, then I think you have a decent chance of playing at Nebraska. And I think most people would look at MJ Sherman's 2 years here and say, MJ Sherman was pretty good, and he was really good those last 6 games of his career. And if Pritchett does that, then I think then that's a really successful transfer. I think what you'd love to see is Pritchett come in and be really, really good right away and kind of lock that whatever it is, left tackle, right tackle spot down, and so that you can move maybe. Let's just say in theory Turner Corcoran could come back.
Mm-hmm.
You can move Turner Corcoran to an interior position where his run blocking skills might have more value.
Now, I do like that he has 2 years. That is encouraging because, as we have seen in the portal era with Rule in charge, like you brought up MJ Sherman, guys have a tendency to pop in year 2.
Yeah.
Like they're just, and I think that's the attractiveness of who they go after in the portal. Now, some guys like a Watson Trent that drops in your lap, or a Westmoreland, they only have 1 year and you're not going to turn them down. But
that's right.
Rule does like those 2 or 3 year transfers. Like Sierra Wright, would Nebraska have jumped on him if he was only a 1 year guy?
Great point.
But the fact that he had 2, and we saw what he did in year 1, you would expect even more of a jump in year 2.
Exactly. Totally accurate. And Tommy Hill was a year 2 guy in a lot of ways for Nebraska. Yes. So if you can get a multi-year transfer, you do expect, once they kind of learn your schemes and they've been on campus for a little while, for that performance to take a jump. And that was true of, Omar Brown,
Definitely.
the defensive back, and just a few others too. So, yeah, I think that's kind of what I see happening there if Pritchett does commit. Obviously, you've got some 1 year guys that they really need to hit. Dane Key, the linebackers, he's going to start, right? Like you almost feel like he's going to. I don't know exactly what they want to do with McCullough. He could be a jack. He could be some other kind of player. He could be a rover. So McCullough to me is a movable part. In other words, you're moving him places and trying to get him mismatches. The linebacker from Georgia Southern is going to come in and be a middle linebacker and be your starter.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably your green dot guy. If he isn't your green dot guy, then who is? I maybe Buford. So they know what they're doing, and I think they've done a really good job on the defensive side of the ball.
Agree.
They just have an intentionality, and they know who to go get, and they know what they want, and they are going to play good defense at Nebraska. They are going to play good defense at Nebraska, and I think this transfer portal haul is just a reaffirmation that they will not settle for a mediocre defense, because they're going to probably put a pretty good product on the field next year.
Sam, so far, I think there's 14 commits. 5 of them are from non-Power 5 programs. It's something that we haven't seen a lot from, Nebraska in the last couple of years under Matt Rule. What's your take on kind of this shift in strategy when it comes to acquiring these Group of 5 or even non-Group of 5 players from the portal?
Well, let's look at the leagues they're coming from. I think that's part of it. You're looking at, some of it is productivity, right?
Yeah.
So, like, if you're getting a guy that's had 360 tackles in the last 3 years, he can do some good work at your level too.
Sure.
But you're looking at a Missouri Valley cornerback. I think Southern Illinois is in Missouri Valley.
Yeah.
You're looking at a Big Sky corner. The Missouri Valley and the Big Sky are playing better football than pretty much any other league in FCS. They just played for the national championship last night, and the Missouri Valley won. But those are your two leagues. If you get football players from those two leagues, you're getting good football players. And then the guy they got from East Tennessee State, ETSU was a very good team. They actually should have beaten North Dakota State. They didn't. They lost, but because North Dakota State recovered an onside kick. But ETSU is a really good program, and so you're getting a guy from there. And if you feel like you can go get a highly productive player either at the FCS or G5 level, you go and do it. Now, the productivity has to be there, and the productivity, I think, has generally been there. And so, Andrew Marshall is an all Big Sky player. You're not going to go get a reserve at a Big Sky school, but a lot of these guys are not reserves. So I think anytime that you can go get a really productive player in those two leagues, you're doing something good. And again, I think Nebraska just has a really good sense of what they want to accomplish on the defensive side of the ball.
Hey, let's talk about Dylan Raiola, because the Ohio State, the Will Howard kind of experience in his 1 year in Columbus, he has finally become exactly what they need him to be, and he's spinning it better than he has even at Kansas State. So let's there's we look at Quinn Ewers, we look at Riley Leonard, we look at Drew Aller, and there's opinions on all 4 of the playoff quarterbacks, but let's bring it local. So now that we're through a year, played 13 games, made it through a whole year, which I think is an accomplishment, and the first time that's happened since Tanner Lee in 2017. What do you think Nebraska, because Sam, I'm looking at next year's schedule. What you just said about defense, I'm nodding my head in agreement. This could set up, if Nebraska seizes opportunities, to be one of those years where it falls into their lap. But they have to seize that opportunity with the schedule the way it's built, with good and bad and easy, and what they have returning. What do they need Dylan Raiola to become to be a major part of that moving forward in 2025?
Well, I think there's the on the field part, and then there's the off the field part. I'll start with the latter one first. I think Raiola has an opportunity to make this his team, and in a lot of ways, like, hey, follow me. I've been here for a year. I know what these guys want. I'm the constant here. They changed coordinators, but they didn't change me. And so, I'm working with the head coach. I'm the guy that's in the room with the transfers as they're coming in. So he has an opportunity to really take charge of the team and make it his team. And I would compare that, if you're, into Mahomes comparisons. Mahomes' second year as the starter, but his third year with the franchise, because obviously the Chiefs went with Alex Smith in his first year. If you look at, the jump that Mahomes was an incredible player in his first year. Obviously, he was an MVP. But, you look at his second year, and he had even taken a bigger jump in terms of his leadership skills. And so I think Raiola's got to take this team, especially that offense, and say, all right, guys, here's who we're going to be, and here's what we're going to do. On the field, there's probably a couple of areas that he would like to improve in. I think they want to get better in the red zone, better at being more decisive in the red zone. And that is a lifelong journey. Everybody who watched Sam Darnold on Sunday night knows that you can be a 27-year-old NFL quarterback and be indecisive in the red zone.
Yeah.
And so, that's a journey that quarterbacks take, and he has to continue to be on that journey. I would compare his developmental curve favorably to, comparably to Drew Aller. Aller obviously didn't play a ton as a true freshman at Penn State, but he was the backup to Sean Clifford. And then Aller comes in year 2, and, he had a good statistical year. I think he's come more into his own, and there's some similarities between the players. They're both taller guys. They're not necessarily the greatest athlete on the planet, but they're athletic enough to make plays. And I think they both have leadership components to them. So if you look at the way that Aller has grown as a player, I think Raiola can look at that and go, yeah, that's kind of like me. Of the 4 quarterbacks that are still left in the deal, I think Aller might be the one you'd compare him to. Will Howard's super outgoing and super extroverted, and he's done a really nice job, I think, of trying to become Mr. Ohio State in the short time that he's been there, and it's probably helped that team because I think probably what's happened with Howard is that some of the guys around him are like, you really like being here. you really care. And I think sometimes some of the guys at Ohio State can get a little blasé. Like, oh, well, we win all the time. I'm a 5-star recruit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really am as good as everybody tells me I am. And here comes Will Howard, sort of the happy, cheeky kid who's just happy to be there. And I think that's probably infectious to some degree to especially some of those receivers. And so I think Raiola can grow as a passer, but Holgorsen will take care of that part. Holgorsen and Glenn Thomas will take care of that, and I do think he'll get better. I think the off-the-field component is more important. He's got to make it his team, and he's got to transfer some of the Matt Ruleisms to his own leadership component. And sometimes, instead of Matt Rule having to get everybody together in a practice where people aren't playing very well, it's got to be Dylan. Yeah. I watched Rex Burkhead make that change, even though he was hurt as a senior. I watched Rex Burkhead and Will Compton take that team and make it their own. And they were actually able to overcome some of the weird stuff that, the weird mood swings that Bo Pelini had. And it was because of Rex and Will and a few other players on that team that made it that way. It wasn't Bo. And I think that's where Dylan's he's got to take some of the leadership mantle from Rule and actually say, now, you know what, guys, we're going to handle this in-house. We're not going to let it get to the head coach. And I think that's the step that Raiola's got to take.
Sam, so we're at the point now in the transfer portal cycle where, we'll just say hypothetically, Pritchett ends up committing to Nebraska. So let's say that happens. You'll have a commit at every single position group on the offensive end and the defensive end, except for running back.
Right.
What do you anticipate them doing? And if you were just, let's say, Sam, you're now Matt Rule. Is that a room that you're still looking to go out and get a transfer portal commit from?
I think you lean on Holgorsen there, and you almost let Holgorsen decide what you do. Let him decide, and you just say, Dana, we can hold now. You can go through spring, and then you can tell me what you think you need. And I think maybe you can do it that way. And so I'd almost say that, like, go through spring, see what you got, and then there's going to be another market that opens. It tends to be a pricier market than the January market, but you do what you got to do. Yeah. And, but maybe there's a guy left in one of these last teams who's looking to make a move and is intrigued by what Nebraska's trying to get done. It's just hard to say. I mean, Quentin Ives is somebody they put 2 years of development into, so they really do want to see what he can bring to the table, and he has not transferred yet. So I think that'll be something to watch too. I don't know that the 105 has to be set here in the next 2 weeks. I think you're going to get until the end of spring to figure that out. So one of the things I think you're going to see happen is some guys are going to go through spring, and then they're going to be presented with, hey, you know what? This is where we're going. And then you're going to see maybe just a few more transfers out there. So Nebraska's probably they can play that game out a little longer. I know they feel like they've got their speed back, and they feel like they've got their complementary backs. They've got Emmett Johnson. They feel good there.
Yeah.
Demarion Parker's going to be really good. Just telling you guys, he's
Yes.
He's a keeper, but he's not a big guy.
Yeah.
So, he's not a red zone guy. So, they do have to find that back. And it's either Ives or we're just going to roll with Emmett Johnson, or you go get somebody in the portal.
You have any sense of a timeline of any discussion from the head man about his staff with Ed Foley, E.J. Barthel, whose contracts were up at the end of December, or Marcus Satterfield, anything like that? You have a timeline in your head when you think this all could be resolved?
Well, I think the roster is getting prioritization, as well it should. I think that'd be fair to say. That through this week, that's a priority. They don't need to be in a rush. I know they said that about John Butler, and then they just hired John Butler.
Yeah.
Do you think that was more about Butler? And we'll talk about him another time. He's really intriguing to me, but they think a lot of him. Rule thinks a lot of him. And so there doesn't need to be a rush this week to get that done.
I don't know.
Hold on. I thought Barthel got a pretty good year out of his guys, but everybody's got to make their own decisions, and that coaching, whatever you call it, convention is soon, right?
Yes. Hey, I want to go back. So you think maybe John Butler forced the timeline to speed up for Matt Rule?
Not forced it. I think they were like, yeah, he's the guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just don't think they were. They felt like they had to go and look. Again, the thing that I suspect, I think what they really respect about John Butler is I've heard it said that people just think he's kind of a genius. Like, he really is good at what he does.
Yeah.
And so that part of it is fine. I think you bring in Phil Snow, and he can kind of walk around and make assessments. And then Matt Rule is the other defensive mind. And Rule is a really good culture setter for defensive players.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have to question for 1 minute that he's going to create the culture on that side of the ball. And so, like, he sets a culture. Snow can kind of walk around, and then I think Butler's really, like, they like what he might be able to come up with schematically, and he can also set the culture. So I think that was more about that. But special teams, I'm guessing he's gotten every resume you can imagine that isn't named LeVar Woods at Iowa. Like, I'm sure LeVar Woods is just going to stay there because I think there's a good chance he's the head coach one day.
I'm with you on that.
I think he'll end up being the head coach there. I could be wrong about that, but I do feel like he'll end up being sort of the walk-around head coach, him or the Seth Wallace or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
But I think Rule's probably gotten resumes from everybody else because they paid Ed Foley $550.
Yeah,
and so that's a heck of a salary to pay a guy.
Yeah.
And as far as Barthel, that's a great question. That's a really good question. I don't know. Does he want to go back east? Because he's, I don't know. But I thought they had a really strong second half of the season.
Absolutely.
This season, and I think you judge people by that. Like, did you guys get better? Yes, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they did. Yeah, but Dowdell got better, and Johnson got better, and Mekhi Nelson, who is Barthel's recruit, they like him. So I don't. And who was the third one you mentioned? Satterfield.
Yep.
Satterfield's contract expired, or they got
next year.
Next year.
But they're not going to pay. They're not going to pay him what they were paying him last year.
Right. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't want to. Satterfield. It's not like he made himself the OC, and so
Sure.
that was Rule's decision. And my understanding is Holgorsen wants him to be the tight ends coach and likes working with him, and finds Satterfield to be a hardworking, plain-spoken, good guy that the tight ends like. I don't think Fedoni's whatever has anything to do with Satterfield.
It does not. That does.
I think Fedoni wants to take a shot at the big leagues, and it's time. It's just time. And so that doesn't have anything to do with it. And you can't. I don't know. Borkircher's deal is what it is. But so I don't know. All three of those are very different to me. I do think they'll get a special teams coordinator. But Chattel, our columnist Tom Chattel, talked to Bill Bush. Bill Bush does a really good thing in this interview today. It's in the paper this morning about the head coach, and Bill Bush worked at Ohio State or Utah actually, is where he worked with Urban Meyer, and Urban Meyer controlled the special teams. And I think that's probably where you got to get as a head coach, is you just got to take the culture over there, and then you can offshore the schemes or whatever to a coordinator, but I feel like the special teams component has to have a large sense of head coach oversight, or it becomes harder to affirm it. Like, it's just the players are like, yeah, well, my stock and trade is on offense and defense. And then I think it was Sipple wrote something too about how at Tennessee, Eckler kind of makes a point of using non-starters on special teams. And that's not a bad idea, because sometimes the starters, even though they're the best athletes on the team, they also have other things that they do. And sometimes when you give the non-starters the specialized, you are a starter on special teams, you're giving them a special role, and you're giving them their thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something to consider too.
Yep.
So there's a lot of different ways you can go at that. And I think we'll have a decision, maybe not this week, could be next, could be the week after.
Yep. Sam, as always, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
All right.